Senator Bernie Sanders led a hearing where CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, was questioned about his union-busting actions. This was a part of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, and interesting stuff came of it, so I want to walk through. This comes within the context of Starbucks, workers within Starbucks stores, multiple locations unionizing, which has been great to see. And of course, I'll respond to the specific things that are said within these clips and also circle back to that broader conversation, because it's not just Starbucks. There are so many areas that union efforts are happening on, and the general systems that need to be addressed. Absolutely important. We'll talk about that as well. But first, here's Bernie Sanders with a little bit to say.
Over the past 18 months, Starbucks has waged the most aggressive and illegal union-busting campaign in the modern history of our country. That union-busting campaign has been led by Howard Schultz, the multi-billionaire founder and director of Starbucks, who is with us this morning only under the threat of subpoena. Let us be clear about the nature of Starbucks' vicious anti-union efforts. The National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, has filed over 80 complaints against Starbucks for violating federal labor law. There have been over 500 unfair labor practice charges lodged against the company, and judges have found that Starbucks broke the law 130 times across 6 states since workers began organizing in the fall of 2021.
Right. And it is so hard already for workers to attain the amount of power within their workplace and advocate properly for their rights or have their rights advocated on behalf of. And that speaks to the more systemic problems that need to be addressed. New laws such as the PRO Act that should be implemented. And so for it to be even harder because a company is taking illegal actions against you and engaging in these union busting actions is absolutely something that should not be put up with, as Bernie Sanders is highlighting. And within big companies, we've watched Amazon efforts as well, unionization efforts. It's so important that workers have some larger than just them as an individual way to have their worker rights advocated on behalf of. Next moment from this hearing.
Have you ever threatened, coerced, or intimidated a worker for supporting a union?
I've had conversations that could have been interpreted in a different way than I intended. It's up to the person who received the information that I spoke to him about.
Were you informed of or involved in the decision to withhold benefits from Starbucks workers in unionized stores, including higher pay and faster sick time accrual?
My understanding, when we created the benefits in May, 1 month after I returned as CEO, my understanding was under the law, we did not have the unilateral right to provide those benefits to employees who were interested in joining a union.
Am I hearing you say that you were involved in?
And then he repeats the same answer. So before we discuss further and get into a little bit of a conversation about unions and some of the narratives we hear coming from anti-union individuals, I want to show you 3 back-to-back clips from this hearing. First, Howard Schultz, then Mitt Romney, and then Rand Paul, and kind of give you the context, and then we'll respond. And it definitely highlights what you're about to hear, some of what we hear from the right, criticism that I see as dishonest against those who are advocating for unions, for the well-being and economic reality of workers. But starting with this Howard Schultz moment, then we'll get to a little more.
This monarch of billionaire, let's just get at that, okay? I grew up in federally subsidized housing. Let me finish. I grew up in federally subsidized housing. My parents never owned a home. I came from nothing. I thought my entire life was based on the achievement of the American dream. Yes, I have billions of dollars. I earned it. No one gave it to me. And I've shared it constantly with
Cassidy.
the people of Starbucks.
Okay, and then it moves on. But before I respond, here is Mitt Romney.
I recognize at the outset there's some irony to a non-coffee drinking Mormon conservative defending a Democrat candidate for president in perhaps one of the most liberal companies in America. That being said, I also think it's somewhat rich that that you're being grilled by people who have never had the opportunity to create a single job, and yet they believe that they know better how to do so, and what's best for the American worker, and what's best for the American economy, what's best for growth.
Okay, and then final one before we discuss, here is Rand Paul.
When I walk in Starbucks, I don't see billionaires buying coffee. I see everyone from top to bottom in there paying for the coffee because they've decided the quality is worth it. But I don't want to be part of any witch hunt that vilifies any American business. So count me out. Count me as one who is ecstatic that Starbucks is an American success story, and I'll have no part in trashing their success.
Why can't we be for a company that is happy that a company is creating jobs and is in America and all that, and also make sure they're not acting illegally against their workers? But to start going through some of this, Howard Schultz tells his story about being able to go from a very tough financial situation to very prosperous. And that actually, while it's him attempting to push back against the left or against Bernie Sanders, whoever might be, is actually getting at the core of the very concern of those people. And what I mean by that is, while everyone's not going to become a billionaire, what he's getting to is economic mobility, the ability of an individual to move up the economic ladder, and how difficult or easy that is. And we've seen over the course of the last decades, it's become much more difficult to move up the economic ladder. Our economic mobility in the United States is now worse. And so him, again, it's not that we're trying to make it a world where everyone can become a billionaire, but him highlighting his American dream success story is exactly the concern that we're talking about here. It's becoming harder to go from that super tough financial situation and rise up. And then the other the two senators you saw there, Mitt Romney and Rand Paul, kind of echoing the narrative you hear quite often, which is those pushing aggressively for workers' rights, for the work conditions of workers. They are anti-business or anti-successful people. And it's so wrong. The period in American history that is referred to as the golden age of American capitalism. Whoa, that's exactly what Mitt Romney and Rand Paul should be on board with, trying to emulate. And that was from 1950 to 1970. Now, it must be noted, anytime we bring up a successful economic time, not everyone was a part of that. The racial oppression, horrible. But when we're talking about trying to strengthen workers' rights, looking at that era and recognizing that during the period of time 1950 to 1970, golden age of American capitalism, you saw much higher union membership. That has dropped significantly. Income inequality has been rising. Economic mobility, worse in the United States. Is it all because of union membership? No. But if they think it's anti-business to be pro-union, they could not be more wrong, because we had much higher union membership, and we had much higher taxes for those at the very top during a time when businesses were doing great. They were exploding. People were having those American dream success stories. Again, it cannot be forgotten that much of the population was left out of this and was actively oppressed. But it's fascinating that their ideas about the economy are just so flawed. And we can have a country where workers are treated correctly and have more power. We balance the scale a little bit between worker power and those at the top of the company, and still have a thriving economy, still have great businesses, great success stories, entrepreneurs, all of that. And I would encourage the left. I think that should be the unified message. We don't have to fall into the framing of the right. And what I mean by that is the criticism, the framing they set up with that criticism. We don't have to accept that of, yeah, we're pro-worker, which means we're anti-business or anti-people becoming financially successful. Now, yes, Howard Schultz within My Dream America would be a little less wealthy, but still perfectly fine, still great, magnificently wealthy, and more reasonably taxed, as we had during a period in time when we were seeing a massive economic expansion. Just a little bit more from this hearing. This is when Republican Senator Mark Wayne Mullen got into a heated back and forth with Bernie Sanders.
Thank you.
Well, let me respond, because the senator did mention my name, I think. And I think you got an all-time record here. You've made more misstatements in a shorter period of time than I have ever heard.
Please correct
Well,
me,
if I'm
because
worth
it's all
$8 million,
public.
excuse me.
It's all public.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right? Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
If I'm worth $8 million, that's good news to me. I'm not aware of it. That's a lie. All right? Number
Part
two,
of public records.
you're probably looking at some phony right-wing internet stuff. It ain't true.
No,
All right? You should read beyond that. It is not true.
it's
All
part of public records.
No, it is not public record.
Okay. Well, you made
It is not
1.7 million on your book.
public record.
You made
All right?
1.7
It is-
on your book.
Excuse me. I've got the mic now. Number
you not
two,
make the statement
I
that if
have
you want to
the
be a
mic
millionaire?
now. I've got it.
Did you
had
not
your
make
time.
that statement?
You had your time.
Okay.
All right? You're not telling the truth. Second of all, you got no evidence that I have ever said that all CEOs are corrupt. I have never, ever said that.
Probably not all, but every time you talk
probably
about
not,
CEOs,
that
you do
shouldn't
say that.
Say it. Furthermore, what this hearing is about is whether or not you talk about being pro-union. Really, what this hearing is about is whether workers have the constitutional right to form a union. The evidence is overwhelming, not from me, but from the National Labor Relations Board, is that time after time after time, despite what Mr. Schultz is saying, Starbucks has broken the law and has prevented workers from joining unions to collectively bargain for decent wages and benefits.
So the reason I play that is just always interesting to watch those back and forths. But also, and we'll actually talk about this more later in today's show, but it's important when we talk about these issues to try to take the emphasis off of the individual in so many different places within politics and onto the system or the broader reality, broader sets of information, data, all of that. Because what the criticism often is from the right about the left, and you saw it play out there a little bit in the earlier clips I showed you, was the left just hates this person or thinks all people are blank who are wealthy or whatever it might be, or they try to kind of throw out the hypocrisy criticism. You saw it there with Bernie Sanders, Mark Wayne Mullen, trying to say, because you're rich, this is disingenuous, because you have a net worth that I don't even care whether or not what he was saying, if it was accurate or not. It doesn't matter, because what we're talking about is systems, broader realities that we want to address. And so if Bernie Sanders is pushing for an America where a worker is more powerful and justly so is able to use the tool of collective action, organizing with other workers, unified around the common goal of advocating for their rights, is able to balance that scale a little bit, and that's the America Bernie Sanders is fighting for, then great. I honestly don't care too much about his net worth or how much he made on a book or whatever it might be. And I don't care if Howard Schultz is at heart a good person or bad person, or if his story, I don't care in the general sense. If his story is one that is good or bad, what I care about is systems being set up in such a way where the incentives are correct and no matter the heart of the powerful person or the wealth of the powerful person. They aren't able to abuse the system and take illegal actions against their workers and all of that. And so I'm not saying the individual case doesn't matter in terms of holding Starbucks individually accountable. That matters. But whenever the criticism is levied that, hey, but Howard Schultz is a good guy, or hey, Starbucks has these good things in terms of employee benefits, or hey, why are you saying this because you're wealthy toward Bernie Sanders? All of that is distracting from the broader conversation about generally it being better if the system is set up in such a way, if laws are implemented in such a way where workers have more power within their workplace. And that doesn't take away from the advancements and growth of businesses, but it does benefit so many people.